So I'm going to talk about particular views, but what I really hope you do is you key in to see about the pieces I'm playing with and see how maybe you might take those and make use of them in different ways. So what actually is the genealogical Adam and Eve? It is a peacemaking effort. It is a civic practice of science where I'm trying to make space for our differences. I'm trying to do that in the context of the values of secular science. And one of the ways I'm doing that is by proposing a particular way to think about a young Adam creation. But that's not really the full way to see it. I think this is like the best analogy I found. This is one of the presents that my son Caleb got for Christmas. It's a bunch of toys that are stuck together with Velcro. Isn't that cool? And you can see on the box, on the upper right there, you can see that it actually has the way the box wants you to fit it together, right? And then you can see Caleb sitting there with it put together that way as well. But you can also see him here messing around with it. So you might think that's him assembling it, but that's not it. It's him disassembling the whole thing and playing around with it. And so my invitation here is, there's a duality, I would say. There's a duality. So yes, I'm going to be talking about a model, so to speak, but if you get fixated on that particular model, you're missing something very critical. This is really a set of toys to play with. And what I'm really asking you to do is not, pick apart the precise way how it was put together here, but rather come play with me. Let's see if there's another way to put it together. There's actually a lot of really cool pieces here. Right now, Bill Craig and I are working on a book right now, looking at the other side of this, of an ancient Adam, and we're getting a whole bunch of new pieces to play with in the drawer in the next book too, where I actually think that it's not so much that there's one way to see this. I think that the evidence in Scripture, the evidence in theology and tradition, and the evidence in science, these things don't actually give us a single view at the end. I think there's a large number of very plausible views. I think that the fun is going to be mapping it out and playing with this together. So I'm going to talk about particular views, but what I really hope you do is you key in to see about the pieces I'm playing with and see how maybe you might take those and make use of them in different ways. And far from discouraging that, I encourage it. That could be the fun of it. So what's the particular view that I put forward here? What's on the cover of the box, so to speak? It's something I would call young Adam creation, and I want to explain to you why I did that and why that makes sense. So young Earth creationism is actually a very diverse movement. Ken Ham speaks for just one component of young Earth creationism. He did not actually speak for me when I was younger. Though I did spend time thinking about young Earth creationism, I was a lot like the young Earth creationists that we see more globally. For example, in India, like we just picked up the Bible, we read it, and it just seemed that Adam was recent, and that's what we believed. And there wasn't really a conflict that we were engaged in, and we didn't really know anything about the Scopes trial or anything. It just seemed to be what Scripture taught. And so that's part of the reason maybe why I've come to some strange views on this, because my actual particular sense of being a young Earth creationist was maybe different than maybe what some of us are used to in terms of the camps. But the truth of the matter actually is Ken Ham, for example, is not really a young Earth creationist. He's a young cosmos creationist. So yes, he believes the Earth is young, but he also thinks the stars are young. He thinks the galaxy is young. And so therefore everything else within those things are young too. And one thing that I found out through dialogue actually is a new camp that I'd never even heard of. It's called young life creation. These are people who accept that the Earth is old. They accept that the stars are old, the galaxy is old, but they think that life was young. Life arose in the last 10,000 years or so. And the way how they do that is they actually are accepted within young Earth creationism, by the way. They're considered young Earth creationists, even though they don't believe the Earth is young. Think about that. And what's going on is they actually are adopting a very similar hermeneutic and approach to Scripture. I would call that what Hans Madume says is scriptural realism. And that's the type of approach to Scripture I came to. I wouldn't even call it literalism. I would say it is, I'd say literalism to reference the Chicago statements, but it's a type of scriptural realism. So what I would say is what I'm putting forward in the Young Adam creation in this book is actually completely in line with that. It's a natural extension of young life creation from young cosmos creation. What they did in young life creation is they did a theological move to scope the creation account so it doesn't actually include the Earth and the cosmos. And it makes complete sense to do that scripturally. And in fact, that's the same way how Reasons to Believe thinks about the flood, as a regional event rather than a global, across the entire globe event. And so what is happening in this book, and that's like the theological movement here, it's actually a young earth creationist reading of Scripture that's scoped such in a way that it's actually entirely consistent with the evidence. That's part of the reason why, for example, when I first mentioned this, one of the first and most durable objections is that sounds like young earth creationism, and we know that's false. Actually, I think part of what's happening here is that there are types of young earth creationism that are false, but this might be one type that isn't. Now that sounds crazy, and it'll make more sense as we go forward. But I think what's going on here, as I said that I was in the no man's land between the trenches, well, this is kind of where I sit. I don't think that it really fits in any of the camps currently, but it could fit in all of them. And I think the real question that's facing a lot of us right now, a lot of groups, is where is it going to sit? And as I said, I really hope that amongst old earth creationists, that it could be embraced as an acceptable position. As another example of old earth creation that recovers what you think is important to Scripture in one way. Maybe it's not your way personally. I think it's possible even that some young earth creationists, actually I know for a fact that some young earth creationists see this as an acceptable view. I hope that evolutionary creationists will come to broadly accept it as an acceptable view. And we could go down the list. I think that's part of the conversation of the next year. And in fact, I would say Reasons to Believe is well ahead of the curve by organizing this workshop so early. So thank you.